everyone. Today I want to show you how you can create an ad through the Facebook API. We'll start by taking an existing ad and reading out all the information that we can get from it, and then we'll kind of wiggle our way towards making a change to that ad and then eventually creating one of our own. Before we get started, quickly wanted to introduce our company to you. So I'm one of the founders of Kitchen.io. We build technology for B2C companies that are driven by performance marketing. So if this topic of this video and others more technical solutions are interesting to you, we can help you do what we do in this video, but a lot faster and a lot easier without needing to dive very deep into the code of it all. But let's get started. So as I said, the best place to to create an ad is usually by taking an existing ad and trying to extract all of the parameters that this ad has and trying to figure out what's going on. So this is what I'm going to do now. I'm going to go over to Ads Manager. I already selected this. I have a simple image ad. So we'll see this in a second on the API. It's called link ad. So the type of ad that has static images only is called link ad. And so in this case, we have a photo here or like an image here. We have a headline. We have the primary text, which sometimes is called body text. We'll see as well that on the user interface in Ads Manager, we always call this primary text and headline and description. But on the API, it can be called very, very differently. And depending on what ad format we have, the places where we'll find this information changes. So it's a bit tricky. But what we do have is we have the website URL as well. And then we have a call to action button below and even a URL parameter. So very simple. But what we'll try to do is, kind of figure out how we can get all of this information from this ad, make sure that we have it all there, and then maybe make one or two changes to it, and then eventually kind of create a second version of this. So the way to do this best is if you go into the URL and have this ad selected, and I'm going to press end, I guess. So I went all the way to the right of this URL, and at the end it says selected ad IDs equal to. And then this is the ad ID of this particular ad. There's another way to get this. So if you're here and click on View Setup, if you go all the way to the right, you also get the ad ID. So I'm just going to copy this over and place it here. And this is all I'm going to do. So this is the Graph API Explorer. In order to use this, you will need to create a Facebook app. I think we have another video on that. But if you already have an application, so I'm using the Kitchen.io app here, and you have access to, or like the permission to access your own ad accounts, then you can do this. So I'm going to press submit, see what happens. So right now we got a response from the Facebook API and it said, hey, yep, I kind of have this object that you're asking me about. Doesn't really tell me anything else about it. So in order to get more information from the Facebook API, we need to ask it for some fields. There are two ways to do this now. Either I can start typing fields if I know exactly what I'm looking for example, the name. And then what we'll see is, oh, yep, we actually got the name back. So, and we can confirm, it says my new image ad. This is exactly the ad that we had selected previously. There's an easier way though on the Graph API Explorer, and this is why I always recommend using the Graph API Explorer when figuring out or learning about a new ad object or experimenting with it. We can just kind of go here and kind of go through all of the different fields that are available. And so we can choose, for example, the ad set. I'm just going to choose ad set ID actually. We can ask it for a bid amount. I don't know if you know this, but you can actually have a specific bid amount on an individual ad, even though the bid normally lives on ad set level. So this is an API only feature. You will only learn about this when you kind of go through something like this. And then what we can go through as well, we can see I didn't select ID, but the ID always comes back to me. I can go into create a time. We can get the campaign ID if we want, the effective status, maybe any issues that the ad has. Tracking specs are super interesting. And then ad creatives. So ad creatives, or you can also see here creative, it's basically the place where we have all of the creative or customer facing or user-facing elements. So the image, etc., will be part of this creative field. And we can also ask it for leads. So if you have a lead ad, you can do this here. We can even get some previews. So for example, if you want to have an embed the preview of an ad into a report, something like that, you can do this. We're not going to go into that now, though. I'm just going to take a few more of these. Insights is, I think we looked at this in a different video. So insights are basically the metrics, like the insights of the ad. So the performance, how much did it spend, etc. This ad didn't actually spend at all yet, so nothing happened here. We can even check it for any ad rules. So rules are, can be set up in the interface on Ads Manager if you want to automatically switch something off or increase bids or whatever. This can also be done via the API with a much more powerful tool set. Let's not get into that. So I just added a bunch of fields, and let's see what we get back. So we can see now we have a lot more information here. For example, we can see the created time. So this was done 3 days ago. Today is the 18th of November. The effective status is still pending review. I think I just made a change to it, and we can probably confirm this here. So updated time, this is actually 8 minutes ago. So we just updated the ad, and now it's pending review. This is something that we would have expected. We can see here the tracking specs are some type of pixel information, and then the rest I'm not really sure. And what else is here? So we have a preview shareable link. So I think this is super interesting. Let me just click on it. So I think this is nice, right? So basically now we can actually preview the ad here as well. So again, I'll let you kind of figure out your exact use case, but I think this can be super neat, because if we know that we can get the preview link, we can, for example, build something like a Google Sheet dashboard, and you can have, instead of just having numbers and IDs in the report, you can actually have a link to preview this. So if you're working with a designer or a video editor who maybe did this, you created this, it's really easy to check what this looks like. And of course, you can kind of look at all of the different views as well. So make sure that it looks fine everywhere else. Cool. Let's go back here. So this is not what we were looking for, right? So we have the recommendations here. It says ad isn't optimized for conversions, and your tracking pixel is active, but your ad isn't optimized. All right, that's this is not really a problem for me, since I don't actually plan on running this ad. But as we can see right now, we have none of the creative information. So we don't have the title, we don't have the headline, we don't have the body text, we don't have the URL parameters, we don't have the link, nothing. And the reason for that is that this information actually lives in the creative. And you can see this here. We actually have the same ID once in the creative field, and then also in the ad creatives field. I'm not sure why they both exist. I think they're kind of a relict of old times, but it is what it is. So there is a way, if we actually say we really only care about the creative, let's maybe just get the creative. So I like having the name still. Right? I like having the name still, and then we have the creative. So there is a way to access information of this creative in this exact API call. And we can do this through these curly brackets. If I don't know if you can see this, but I now added curly bracket open ID, comma name. This is the same. It's kind of like a second level of adding possible fields. And so you can see, well, the name of the creative is completely irrelevant, right? It has like some type of unique identifier at the end. It's just called Performance Marketing OS, which is basically the headline. So it's not really helpful. But what we could do is, we could try and figure out other information that we can read out. The problem now is that the Graph API Explorer doesn't actually give me, further fields that the ad creative has. So in order to get there, what we should do is just go to this to the creative ID and basically do the call there. So you can just click on it in the Ad Explorer, API Explorer. And now this may look exactly the same to you, but instead of now asking for an ad information, we're actually now asking for the creative information. And you can see this now that we have a list of fields available that we didn't have before, like call to action type, right? And we see, all right, call to action types learn more. That's good, right? So that's something that we wanted to figure out. And we have a bunch of other stuff. We have a body here. We have, let's see, authorization category. I don't think is so relevant. We can take the account ID. What else? So ID, we already have that. Link URL, I think that's super interesting. I know there's something called URL tags. Again, we have previews available here. We have title. Yeah, I mean, feel free to click on anything that looks interesting to you, of course. I'm just going to run this now and see what happens. All right, okay, we can see the title says the Performance Marketing OS and the body says Large Scale Performance Marketing Reinvented, right? Which is exactly the text that I used in the primary text field. So this is the body, right? And the title is actually the headline. And we haven't found the description yet, but we do have the website URL. We don't have the website URL. Never mind, we don't have it yet. But we have the URL tags, so that looks good. So nobody tells you this really, but or you can't really find it out from using Graph API Explorer. But in order to get the actual meat of the ad, we need to go into something called object story spec. And so this is not always the case. So for example, if you run an ad with multiple headlines or body text or images, then all of the information about the ad will be in the field asset feed spec. But that is a little bit too complicated for this video. So we'll just go into object story spec. And this is basically where you will find all of the information about the creative. There's also something, as you can see, is called object story ID. And object story ID is a field that will only show up, only have any meaningful information when you're using an existing page post and using that to run the ad. So this is where you will find the reference to this post that you previously created on the Facebook page. So I'm going to run this now, and then we can see in the object story spec, we actually have everything that we want. So you can see we have object story spec. And in there, we have a page ID and Instagram actor ID, right? And so this looks very similar to what we have at the top of this, of the ads manager view. So where it says identity, where here it says Facebook page and then Instagram account use selected page, right? Don't know what that means, but we can see here we have an Instagram actor ID that is different to the page ID. Don't really know what it means here, but we have it. And then we have another field that's called link data. And in the link data field, we actually have the link, the message, the name, description. We have an image hash. This is basically the ID of the image, if you will. And then we have the call to action here as well. And again, this is something that can be a little bit confusing, but if we ever want to make a change, so if you ever want to make a change to an ad creative, if you want to, or to an ad or want to create a new ad, we cannot actually use the title field, the body field, or the call to action type field, but we can only use what is in link data. So these are kind of title, body, and call to action are read only. So they're only there, so they make it easier for us to understand, what is the headline without kind of going deep down the rabbit hole of object story spec, etc. But if you want to make a change to actually edit something or update something or create something new, you cannot use these fields. So I'm going to get rid of them just so they're not too confusing, and we'll just keep URL tags and object story spec. And so this is a great first place to start, and let's make our first little change, or let's try to make our first little change. We'll see that not everything that we want to do is always so easy. So in order to make a change, what I could recommend, or to kind of go ahead, would be to just kind of copy everything that you see in here, right? So copy this, and then over here go to post. So we usually use this, right? When we make an API call, we tend to use either get or post request. Of course, we can also use the delete type in order to delete an object, but it's usually not relevant in our case. So if we want to create something or update something, we use the post request. And you can go here and click on JSON. And then in this field, and I'm going to put myself, somewhere here, we can now copy paste this over here. And what we can do is, so this now should basically, access this object, right? This ID. So we can do this here. I'm going to go here again. I'm going to remove the ID here because we're already using the ID in our main URL. So in the call, One thing to keep in mind is that when you post to an object, basically it may make changes to it, but you only see the changes that you ask, like for the fields that you ask for. So for example, if you make a change to the URL tags, but in the URL, like in the fields up here, you don't have URL tags, then you won't see the change. So still make it, but these fields, like this field parameter, is only for the information you want to get back once Facebook responds to you. So I'm going to try and do this. I'm going to say, I'm going to put a typo in here. I'm going to put in Instagram, right? And let's see what happens if we try to do that. So what it says is, okay, I try to post this, this information to this ID, and this is if you follow any, ever want to make any changes to any ad object on the Facebook API, this would be the correct way of doing it. The problem is that ad creatives are immutable, so we cannot actually change any ad creatives. What that means is that if we, for example, and in the user interface, I think it's hopefully very clear, is that if we now make a change here in the user interface, what will happen in the background is Facebook will actually not change the ad creative, but it will generate a new ad creative with all the new information. And so this is also what we need to do. If we want to make a change to the ad via the API, we need to first create a new ad creative and then attach this ad creative to this ad. So this is what we're going to do. All right, so how do you create an ad creative, right? So we cannot update it, as we said, we have to create the ad creative. And the way this works is we basically make a call to the Facebook account and we say, hey, Facebook account, I want a new ad creative. Here's what it looks like. So an ad creative, when you create it for the first time, it is completely independent of an ad set or campaign. It just lives in one account. That's it. So there's no other connections. Only when you then attach it to an ad, that's when you kind of make the connection. But you can use the same ad creative and attach it to multiple different ads. So if you've seen on Ads Manager, when you try to duplicate something and it says, actually let's look at it. When you duplicate and it says show existing reactions, comments, and shares on new ads, what will happen is it will create a new ad, but attach the exact same ad creative from your original ad to this ad over here. So they're referring exactly to the same ad creative, which is why also all reactions are the same. So you have two different ads, but they share the same ad creative in that case. But let's go back here. So we need to make an API call to the ad account, creating this information. And to do this, we need to get the account ID. And again, this can be found in the URL usually. You can also see it up here, right? So my test account. And I think we've done this before, but whenever you want to make a call to the account, it won't work by just using the ID, but you have to use this weird ACT underscore in front of it. So when we do this, when we basically make a call to this will be identified as the ad account. And I'll confirm this to you. I'm just going to copy this stuff. So let's just press get. So now we can see, yep, this is indeed an ad account. And we can see, right, okay, the owner is this business manager ID and the name is kitchen test account, etc., etc. But what we want to do is we actually want to make, we want to create some new ad creative, right? In order to do that, what we need to do is we need to call the ad creatives endpoint. So you can see this here. The way it will work is that we basically call this, when you do this /, this is basically an edge. So this basically gives us all ad creatives tied, or ad creative objects tied to the ad account. So this is very different to using fields, because when you ask for fields, it will give you, will assume that these are, an integral part of the ad account, whereas ad creatives are just attached to an account. So I'm just going to do this, add creatives, cool, and press submit. And so we can see we actually get a bunch of information about the ad creatives, and we know already how to get more information. For example, we could say, curly bracket open, ID, comma, name. Oh, maybe not. Okay, sorry, we need to use fields here. Okay, So you can see we basically have the names here, and again, we could use title as well, whatever we kind of want to do. But as we know, we want to actually create a new ad creative. But the best way of figuring out how to create something is always getting all the existing ones and then just kind of working backwards. So in order to create something, all we need to do is change this to post. And so now if we make a post to this endpoint, ad account /adcreatives, we will be able to create a new ad creative. And I'm going to make sure that we get the information back that we use here. So I copied this before, and I just pressed it, pasted it again. So let's see what happens. There we go. So we now, even though this kind of all looks the same, we can see now we have a new ad creative with the source Instagram. And we also see that we used all of this information here to kind of send it back to the API, and it generated a name and an ID for us. So we didn't use a name, but it created one for us, and it also created an ID. And so in order to now update the ads, right, if we want to now make a change, if we now actually want to make a change to this ad and replace the URL parameter here, what we need to do is we need to take this creative ID, and attach it to the existing ad. And so here is how we do that. So we now again need the ad ID, right? So I just copy it from over here. So what we want to do is we want to say, hey, I want to for this ad, we want to make a change to the creative ID, exactly. And then once it's done, we actually want to ask it for the creative as well. So we make sure that that worked. And so this is a little bit tricky. So the way to do this is we basically make a post request to this ad ID, and we kind of send it some information about the creative. So I'm going to test this. I think this is not right, but we'll see. Sorry, actually what we need to do is we need to say creative. I think this is how it works. So we basically say, so we make a call to the ad ID, and we say the information that we send it is, we say creative, and then ID is equal to that. So that should make sure that we're basically updating the creative field. Let's see if that works. And it's not saying. It may be, this is very confusing. So one nice way of looking this up is just going to the developer docs. So you can say, I think maybe it's creative ID. What I like doing is I like going to the reference here, go to add, and then add creatives. Okay, so this looks better. Can't perform operation on this endpoint. Okay, yeah. All right, so we see here already that when creating an ad, we can use this creative field. Where is the creative ID? All right, okay, so let me zoom out a little bit. But the best way usually of doing this is kind of going to, on the right-hand side, to go on this page, add the reading, and then parameters. So parameters is basically what we're looking at. And field in this case is creative. We know this already, and it says this field is required for create. And we can see, okay, you may supply the ID with an object as follows. So if we want to make a change to the creative ID, this is what we need to do. So the field is called creative, and then the object is creative ID : creative ID. Sorry, I mean, this is the actual creative ID. So I need to make a change. This is one of those things that this doesn't follow any rule here, right? So the way that this works exactly this way makes no sense to me because we're already specifying that this is the creative. So, surely we should just be able to refer to an ID, but sometimes the Facebook API is inconsistent like that. So when we do this and we post, All right, wonderful. This worked. So we can just quickly double check. I copied this over. This is the creative ID we want to attach. And yes, when I search for it on the page, we can see now the creative is attached here. And when we go over to Ads Manager, let's refresh the page. There we go. So we made our first change. It says UTM source is equal to Instagram. So that worked perfectly fine. Cool. So let's go back. Let's create a new ad with this exact creative, right? So we actually want to say, hey, this is the creative that I want, but let's create a new ad with it. So the way that we do this is, again, going back to where we started in a way, and we need to say, what is the information that we have about or like need for an ad to be whole in a way, right? We know already that most of the information is actually just in the creative, right? We can see that this identity part is in it, the format, I guess, sort of is in it, the image is in it, the primary text, the headline, the description, the website, everything is part of the creative. So the question is, what isn't part of the creative? And that is, weirdly enough, the conversion tracking. So these bits are not part of the creative, but the URL parameters are. I guess because they get attached to the link when a user clicks on it. So maybe that's why they added it there. But yeah, so everything else is actually already in the creative. So the only thing that we need to get other than the creative ID is actually the conversion tracking specs. And I already said conversion tracking specs because on the API side, it's actually called tracking specs. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over here and say, okay, we have our old ad, right? We have this ad that we had before, and we have a creative here, and we have tracking specs here. And we know we have a name. So what I'll do now is I'll just copy this thing over again, copy it, and click over to go over to post and copy all this over here. So you can see that it's basically the same thing. We know already that the ID we won't need because when we create a new object, Facebook would just give us an ID back. And the name, well, I want it to be, I want to make sure that we're actually creating something new. So I'm just going to call it my new image ad 2. And we referring back to the same creative that we used before, right? So this is what we just created, this new creative with a URL source, UTM source Instagram. And we use the tracking specs because we know we kind of need tracking specs to create an ad. So doing this should actually create a perfect duplicate of the first ad except for the name. So this is what we're hoping to do. And as before, when creating something new, what we actually need to do is we need to attach it to something. And in our case, there are two ways of doing this. Either we say, hey, ad set, here's a new ad. Or we say, hey, ad account, here's a new ad, attach it to this ad set. So I'm going to go with a more direct way of attaching it to the ad set. And the way this works is you basically need to figure out the ad set ID, and same as before, ad set ID. And what we want to do is we want to say, hey, for this ad set, we want to create a new ad. So we need to call this ads endpoint. And the way to figure this out is not always super straightforward, but we can see this here. So in the documentation, it says ad set ads. And then we can see that this is how you get ads, right? So it says get v9.0, then it says ad set ID, right, with curly brackets. So this is where you need to replace your own ad set ID, and it says ads here. So this is how you get it. And then you can always look at creating it here. You can't perform this operation. So maybe this has changed in the latest version. Let's try if this actually works. And if it doesn't work, we'll go the other way. So let's see. All right. Okay. So forget what I said just now. So we cannot create an ad on the ad set endpoint. What we need to do is we need to create it on the account and then attach it to the ad set. But we can do this in one step. So with a creative, you have to do it in like 2 steps. With an ad, we can do it in 1 step. So let me copy over the account over here. And so basically we'll make a call to add account to this ad account ID /ads. And then in our JSON, we now need to add an ad set ID for Facebook to know where it should actually put this ad. So here we need to say ad set ID. It should not be like that. And the ad set ID was this one. All right, so we're still doing exactly the same thing, but we're basically saying now, hey, ad account, I want to create a new ad, and please attach it to this ad set. Let's see if that works. All right, so it's saying the ad is missing one or more required fields. Unfortunately, it doesn't tell me what it needs, what other information it needs. Let's take a look. So we have the, sorry, this is the ad. So we have the identity, we have the ad creative, have the website, we have a link, we have a call to action button, we have tracking specs. All right, so the best way, I also honestly don't know right now what I missed, but maybe we need to give it a status. Let's see. So, I mean, that would be something that we're missing, obviously. But let's go here. So let's go into the documentation. We can go to add account ads, and we can go to creating, and we can see an example here. And so this is very confusing, I think, but we can see this here. All right, I think this is basically the best way of looking at it. So when you go to curl CURL, and even there is a way to actually go over to the Graph API Explorer. I think it's just not very helpful that it puts it into the URL. This is basically the different way of working with it. So we can see we actually missed status. So this is obviously not very helpful from Facebook that it doesn't tell us that we missed status, but let's just add one. So we'll say, hey, status should be paused. Doing that. Let's see if that works. Your ad is missing one or more required fields. So maybe my formatting is off, and that's why it's trying to do something weird here. Creative ID. That is good. Tracking specs is here. Ad set ID. Ad set ID, name, creative, status. It's a bit sad, really. And tracking specs as well. Invalid parameter. Oh, okay. I'm really sorry. So this is again, I mean, this is ridiculous, right? So basically, when I ask Facebook, and like when I ask the Facebook for the ad and the creative field, this is what it will return, right? It will return ID equal to that. But when I create it, I need to change it back to creative ID. And so we did this before, obviously, but kind of missed the point there. So we can see now, though, we actually did create a new ad, and this is the ID. And let me copy this one over. And actually, let's just hit refresh over here on the Ad Manager. And there we go. We have the new ad, and we can double check. So I copy pasted the ad ID. We can see here this was created, and the ad ID, the ad is exactly the same as before. So any of the interactions, comments, likes, etc., would be shared because they're actually referring back to the creative, same creative, and this works super well. Yeah, this is it. Hope you learned something, and looking forward to seeing you in the next video.